morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever one it is for you. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be doing a D&D inspired story. I hope you enjoy. Please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of it, and if you'd like to see more of this content, but please enjoy the story. People, the Var'mani, those who walk the cycle, are not one people, but many, scattered like leaves in the wind, yet bound by the same rhythms of the earth. Our lives are shaped by the eternal movement between the groves, where nature grants us brief sanctuary, before pushing us onward once more. We wear what the land provides, woven reeds and softened hides, adorned with trinkets of bone, stone, and wood. Each garment carries the marks of our ancestors, painted in deep ochres and ash blacks, swirling in patterns that tell the stories of those who have walked before us. No two sets are alike, for each of us weaves our own path into what we wear, a tradition passed from mother to child. Our shelters impermanent, built only to last as long as the grove allows. We graft them from bent saplings and thick firs, small enough to be raised in a day and left behind without regret. Our fires burn low, for we have learned that too much light, too much sound at night can call upon unseen things lurking beyond the grove's edge. The child in the grove. Before there was magic, there was only the wild. The world was not made for us. Long before we learned to carve stone into shelter, or summon fire to keep the darkness at bay, we were nothing but whispers in the great wild. We walked amongst giants, prey to the hunger of creatures far older and far greater than we could ever hope to understand. Even the land itself was against us. A path carved one day would vanish the next, swallowed by creeping roots and strangling vines. We were wanderers, moving where the land allowed it, seeking refuge wherever we could. But no shelter was permanent. No haven was truly ours to claim. And yet, there were the groves, perfect circles of safety. They were sacred, not by any ritual of our own, but by the will of the land itself. Within them, the endless hunger of the wild grew silent. The air was still, the sky open. We did not know why they existed, only that they did, and we relied on them, just as we relied on the rivers and the stars. But they did not last. They withered, as all things do, and we were forced to move along once more. The grasses grew pale, the breath of the land thin, and the safety we had borrowed slipped from our grasp. So we followed the cycle, leaving behind dying groves and seeking those newly born. This was our way. It had always been. But then we found him. I remember that day. The grove was young, its earth soft beneath my hands, its air thick with the scent of new life. The tribe had moved quickly, eager to claim the safety it offered, to rest weary feet and fill empty bellies. The others spoke of the hunt, of shelter, of the work ahead. But I had heard something else. A stillness deeper than silence. At the heart of the grove, where the grass grew the tallest, and the wind did not stir you waylading, a babe no older than a few moons, swaddled in nothing but the warmth of the earth itself. You did not cry, you did not shiver. The cold should have stolen your breath from your lungs. Yet there you lay, untouched by the night's hunger. And there were no tracks, no mother's scent lingered in the air. No footprints marked the soil, no sign of how you'd come to be. It was as if the grove itself had brought you forth, an offering, a question, a secret wrapped in the shape of a child. The others hesitated. Even Var'mani, our shaman, stood in uneasy silence. The old ways did not account for such a thing. A child, born of nowhere, in the heart of the grove? It was a story the land had never told before. I should have been afraid. Perhaps I was, but I could not leave you there. So I reached for you, and when my hands touched your skin, the wind stirred. Not a gust, nor a howl, just the faintest whisper, like breath against my ears. The grasses swayed, and for the first time in my life, I felt the land watching. You blinked up at me then, your eyes wide and unknowing, and I knew, in that moment, you did not belong to the wild. You belonged to us. We named him Tanu. In the old tongue, it meant raccoon, though not in the way one would name an animal. It meant one who slips between the cracks, one who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. A name for a trickster, for one who survives by wit rather than claw. It suited him far too well. The tribe took him in, as I known they would, but a child without a past is a child without roots. The people whispered when they thought he could not hear. They did not hate him, but neither did they embrace him as one of their own. He was something uncertain, something the land had placed in their hands without explanation. And when the land gives without reason, it can take just as suddenly. He grew up knowing this, but Tanu did not let it break him. If he was not given a place, he would carve one for himself. And he was not alone. There was Keta. If Tanu was the drifting feather, Keta was the stone that anchored him. They were bound in a way only two lost souls could be. Keta had been born to the tribe, but left with nothing. His mother taken by sickness, his father by the hunt. He too had learned to grow without roots, and in Tanu, he found a brother. Together they became inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. Where one schemed, the other whispered warnings, only to be ignored. And oh, how they schemed. It was harmless at first. Stolen bites of fruit before the feast, false tracks that sent the hunters on wild chases. But mischief is a fire that grows, and Tanu's mind was never still. One day it led them beyond the boundary of the grove, where the wild reclaimed the land. They found it in the shade of a twisted tree, a flower black as the night sky, its petals curling like fingers reaching for something unseen. It did not sway with the wind. It did not bend to their breath. It simply waited. Tanu, of course, reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the petals, the earth shuddered. A whisper, like breath against the ear. The veins of the flower pulsed, and from its base, something moved. A root, thick as his arm, reached toward him, something enticing Tanu in. Keta yanked him back. The ground where he stood quivered, the soil beneath shifting, as if something deeper within it stirred. The boys stumbled away, fear clawing at their breath, and then they heard a voice. "You are lucky." I stepped into view, watching them with the patience of one who has seen this before. Tanu opened his mouth, likely to spin some clever yarn, but I silenced him with a glance. I knelt beside the flower, my fingers tracing the edge of its petals, not touching, never touching. "This is a nyaraka," I told them, "a hunger root. It does not take its prey by force. It waits, it calls, it makes you want to touch it. And when you do, it feeds." Tanu swallowed hard, rubbing his arm. "It whispered." I nodded. All things whisper if you know how to listen. But curiosity is only a gift when paired with the strength to face what it reveals. He frowned, but I saw the way my words settled into him, the way they stuck. I did not need to say more. I had been their watcher, their guide, but I was not the one meant to walk ahead. That honor had belonged to Varukai, the man who had shaped me as I now shaped them. But the land does not wait, even for the wise, and when the land called Varukai home, it was my name, Azi. He spoke before he left us. I had never asked for the title, never sought it, but when I pressed my forehead to his cooling skin and whispered my final prayer, I knew the land had chosen. And so I became the shaman, and Tanu, the trickster born of the grove, became my burden and the tribe's hope. The arrival celebration. The air hummed with the beat of drums, the rhythm pulsing through the gathering like a second heartbeat. Fires burned low, their embers glowing like watchful eyes of the ancestors, casting flickering light over the faces of the Var'mani. The arrival celebration had begun. Tanu inhaled deeply, savoring the mingling scents of roasting meat and the sharp tang of fermented root drink. But above all, the smell of somu fruit filled the air, its rich, honeyed aroma unmistakable. The golden fruit, large as a fist and covered in thick, ridged skin, was a delicacy found only in the groves, sweet as stolen kisses and nourishing as a mother's embrace. It was a sign of prosperity and renewal. "Bet I can eat 3 before you finish 1, Keta said, plucking a soma fruit from a woven basket and tossing it to Tanu. Tanu caught it effortlessly, rolling it in his hands. "I bet you could. That's why you've had 2 new pairs of pants this cycle," he shot back, grinning. Keta smirked but said nothing, biting into his fruit with his usual quiet determination. The celebration roared around them, children darting between dancers, elders sat in tight circles trading stories, and the hunters displaying their latest kills with pride. At the center of it all sat Eluna, her face lit by the fire as she laughed at something her father whispered in her ear. Tanu caught himself staring. She always had a way of making the night feel brighter. A sudden commotion drew his attention. Near the food baskets, a wiry boy, Maru, the son of a respected elder, stood with his arms crossed, his face twisted in a smirk. Before him, a younger boy, barely old enough to run, clutched a somo fruit in trembling hands. "That's not yours," Maru said, voice carrying over the revelry. "You didn't earn it." The younger boy shrank under his gaze, looking ready to flee. Tanu sighed, already moving before he could think better of it. Keta followed without a word. "Is that so?" Tanu said, slipping between Maru and the boy. He plucked a somo fruit from the basket and weighed it in his palms. "Funny, I don't recall you going on the hunt." Maru scowled. "That's not the same. I picked these somo." Tanu took a bite, savoring the burst of sweetness before speaking around his mouthful. "It isn't?" He gestured to the boy. "Look at him, small, sure, but someday he'll be out there hunting, gathering, protecting the tribe, same as the rest of us. If he doesn't eat, he will stay small." A few onlookers murmured their agreement. Maru shifted uncomfortably. "Besides," Tanu continued, flashing a grin, "if we start making rules about who earned their food, you might have to give yours back." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Maru's face darkened, but he said nothing more. The younger boy, emboldened, clutched his fruit tightly and scurried away. Tanu dusted his hands and turned to find Ozzy, watching from the edge of the firelight, his face unreadable. But there, for just a moment, was the barest dip of his head, an acknowledgement. Tsanu's chest swelled with something warm, something steady. Maybe he hadn't earned his place in the same way others had, but tonight, at least, he had claimed it. The initiation. The air in the grove was thick with anticipation, the whispers of those who had undergone the initiation mixing with the nervous energy of those who had not. The elders prepared the ritual space, their faces solemn, their movements precise. Fires burned low, their embers casting flickering shadows along the roots of the great trees. Tonight, the newest initiates would face their trial. None spoke of what happened beyond the veil of secrecy, but Tanu had heard stories of visions, of spirits, of terrors faced in the mind alone, and he was ready, or so he believed. Earlier in the day, as the tribe prepared for the ceremony, Tanu spotted Aluna sitting near the edge of the grove, sharpening the tip of an arrow with slow, practiced motions. The way she moved, calm, sure, as if she belonged to the world in a way he never could. It frustrated him as much as it fascinated him. He strode up to her, wearing his most confident grin. "You know," he said, leaning on a nearby tree, "I bet I'd walk through that trial without even flinching." Iluna barely glanced up. "Would you?" "Of course." Tanu folded his arms. "I mean, how bad can it be? A few spirits whispering in my ear? I face worse just walking through the forest at night." Iluna let out a short breath. Not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. "You think spirits are afraid of you, Tanu?" "Well, they should be." This time she did look at him, her golden eyes assessing. "You talk a lot, Tanu. Maybe one day you'll say something worth listening to." With that, she stood, slung her bow over her shoulder, and walked away without another word. Tanu watched her go, heat rising to his face, a mixture of irritation and something else he didn't want to name. What he didn't see was the brief hesitation in her step before she vanished into the trees, or the way she ran her fingers over the small carved charm she always wore. That night, Tanu waited until the fires burned low and the tribe gathered for the initiation. He caught Ketta's arm as they lingered at the edge of the ceremony space. "Come on, we'll sneak in and watch from the shadows. We'll see what really happens." Ketta stiffened. "You know we can't. No one will even know." Ketta shook his head. "Ozzy said the consequences are serious. Ozzy says a lot of things, and he's usually right." Tanu rolled his eyes. "Look, if you don't want to come, fine, but I need to see this for myself." Ketta hesitated, then took a step back. "I won't break tradition." Tanu scoffed. "Fine, go be a rock then." Ketta's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more as Tanu slipped away into the dark. Tanu moved carefully, sticking to the shadows, his heart pounding as he crept closer to the ritual space. He could see the initiates kneeling before the elders, their faces painted with symbols drawn in crushed ash and sacred oils. Ozzy lifted a carved wooden bowl to their lips, filled with the thick, dark tea that smelled of bitter root and something deeper, something ancient. After a few moments, their bodies went rigid. Then, one by one, they trembled, eyes wide, locked in some unseen battle. Some wept, some gasped in horror, some whispered to things Tanu could not see. His breath hitched. He had expected a test of endurance, of strength. Not this, not whatever this was. Then, without warning, a hand clamped onto his shoulder. He barely had time to yelp before he was yanked backwards, spun around to face Ozzy. But this was not the calm, ever-knowing Ozzy that he knew. This Ozzy's eyes burned with fury, his voice sharp as flint. "You dare!" Tanu opened his mouth, but no words came. "There are laws older than you, older than me, and you would break them, like a child snapping a branch." Ozzy's grip tightened, hurting. "You think yourself ready? You are not, and now you will answer for it." The next morning, as the tribe gathered for the first light of day, Ozzy stood before them all and spoke. At the next departure ceremony, Tanu will remain behind. He will walk alone for 1 year. If he survives, he will return to us a man. If not, then the cycle shall move on without him. The tribe murmured, some in shock, some in solemn understanding. Tanu felt the weight of their gazes, felt the weight of Ozzy's judgment, and deep in his heart, beneath the fear, something else stirred. This was the very grove where he had been found almost 14 years ago. Now, it would be the place where he was reborn. The departure ceremony. The departure ceremony came swiftly, and with it, the weight of Tanu's exile settled fully upon him. He stood before the gathered tribe, his belongings laid out before him. A knife, sharp and sturdy, a bow, strung and well-balanced, a fire starter, small, compact, and formed from some shimmering stone that sparked with the slightest strike. One by one, Members of the tribe approached, offering quiet words or silent nods. Then came Keta. Without hesitation, he held out his hand, and Tanu knew what he meant. If Tanu was to leave, he would not do so without a bond to bring him back. Tanu unsheathed his knife. Without flinching, Keta extended his palm, a quick, shallow cut. Then, Keta took the blade and did the same to Tanu. They clasped hands, bloods mixing, sealing something unspoken but understood between them. Then Eluna appeared. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. So the great Tanu finally has no words. He tried to smirk, tried to find the wit that always came so easily, but nothing came, and she saw it. He knew she saw it. Eluna sighed, then, in a rare moment of tenderness, pulled him into a quick, fierce hug. When she stepped back, she pressed something into his hand. An arrow, its shaft made of a material he had never seen before. Smooth but strong. Light yet unyielding. For when you need to remember who you are, she said. And before he could respond, she was gone. Finally, Ozzy approached, his face unreadable, but his eyes betrayed something. Regret, perhaps, or sorrow. This is not a punishment, Tanu. It is a lesson, and it is one I believe you will learn. But do not seek to prove yourself with strength of arm alone. Strength is more than force, more than defiance. Tanu swallowed hard. Then what is it? Ozzy placed a hand on his shoulder. You will learn. With that, the ceremony ended. Tanu turned toward the wilderness, towards his fate, and he walked forward, alone.